Hey, what's the deal, YouTube? It's your girl, Miss Honey. Welcome back to the channel, you guys. It is your girl, Miss Honey, here with another Lovecraft Country Season 1 review. This is episode 5, Strange Case, and I would venture to say that this has been one of the most controversial so far out of all episodes for this first season of Lovecraft Country to be the most talked about. The most confusing, the most befuddling to the viewers, to us as viewers. And so I'm super excited to come in and just give a quick review. Obviously, it's not going to be quick. Miss Honey doesn't do quick. But just to expound on the episode a little bit so that we may discuss. This episode, as I've stated, is called Strange Case, and we come in on a scene of a woman sleeping in a bed, a round bed. Now, mind you, this is Jim Crow, 1950s, so a round bed covered in sateen sheet, a room that is thoughtfully decorated. There is sunlight once again coming through yet another window here on this show, and we see where the woman turns in the bed as if she's stirring to wake up, and she stretches and also looks at her hand. Now, when she looks at her hand, I am almost certain she sees the hand of a white woman, but I'm groggy. I'll wipe my eyes, I will clear my head, and I will look again. And this time she looks down at her arms and her hands, and she sees she's white. No big deal. No big deal. The average person is familiar with their own skin color. This should not be a big deal, but this woman seems alarmed. She gets up and she is naked and she stumbles. Mind you, she has an average body for a white woman. It's not anything too wistful. It's not anything too dainty. It looks a bit lived in. And she stumbles naked to a full-length mirror and looks at herself completely and seems utterly shocked. She slaps her face. Wake up! Wake up! Wake up, Ruby! Ruby? Not Sister Big Bone. Not Leti's sister Ruby. Not the brick house. No, this is not Ruby. This is another Ruby. This is white Ruby. We don't know what's going on. We have no idea. Next scene, we see white Ruby stumbling and disheveled. She is just in a simple robe, a sateen robe. And she is stumbling through a downtown area. Her hair is mussed. We see her looking about, looking in store windows, and she walks up to one store window and it says Sheffield and Sons Barber Shop, and the gentleman walks out and says, "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need help, ma'am?" And she's and she says what her whole name is. I'm Ruby Baptiste. And he is looking at her as if should that mean something? What, are you lost? And she backs up and backs up and backs up. And when she does, she bumps into a little black boy who's just walking down the sidewalk eating popcorn. Knocks popcorn out of his hand. And at this moment, the police pull up. They race up. And they get out of the car and they say, "Well, are you okay, ma'am? Are you okay? Has he molested you?" And they're talking about the small child, the young black male. He's down on the ground and one cop is on top of him and another cop is kind of gathering her up a little bit, sort of protecting her. And the police that's got the young black man down on the ground raises up his stick and he, acts as though he's going to swing, but he stops just quickly. You don't have to protect this animal, man. Tell us what he did to you. Did he molest you? And when she realizes, oh, wait. No, please, officer. He did nothing. No, please. At this moment, I noticed that there's not other Caucasians around. There's not other white people. It is predominantly black. It's white Ruby, but why would white Ruby, lost or no, be down in the black part of town with black businesses and black people walking about? How did the police know to find her here? They gather her up and put her in the car, and all of the black people standing around are aghast. Like, what has just happened here? We see some families, mother and father and child, and we see where the fathers are covering the eyes of the child. Not because there is a white woman in her robe, but probably because they were almost certain they were going to see a little black boy be beat to death on the street. They gather her up, white Ruby. Put her in the back of the police car. Say, ma'am, your husband has been looking for you. And she says, no, he's not my husband. He did something to me. You say, ma'am, now just calm down. Just calm down. And she leans back into the seat and she begins to contort. And we hear bones cracking. And the police officer looks through the rear view mirror at her and says, oh, these must be the spells that her husband was talking about. She reaches for the door on one side, it is locked, and she reaches for the door on the other side, and it is locked, and her body continues to contort and pop and crack. She throws herself up against the window, and we see her eyes gape open, and they're both blue. And in an instant, one remains blue while the other begins to turn brown. They pull through this wonderful, beautiful, spectacular neighborhood. We can see now that we're no longer in the black part of town. Pull up in a yard, in a beautiful home. It's daylight. It doesn't look familiar to us. Out walks William. Gathers her up, feet, arms, legs, everything, carrying her like a broken doll. Thanks the officers, sends them on their way and takes Ruby inside. Once Ruby and William get inside, he puts her down on the floor. This section of the floor is carpeted, but it is also covered in a plastic. It's not looking good for white Ruby. Puts her down on the floor on top of the plastic and goes and he turns the television up. It's a news program. Says to himself, wouldn't want anyone to hear us now, would we? Walks off, and when he comes back, he is fully gloved. Long gloves, like the kind you see those veterinarians use when they reach into the belly or the rectum or the uterus of a cow. All the way to the elbow, and he has a knife. She is wriggling and wriling, cracking, popping, cracking bones. What is this? What is going on? White Ruby is crawling and crawling. And she is half on and half off of the plastic. And William grabs her legs at the ankles and snatches her back onto the plastic full. Puts the knife down and kneels down next to white Ruby and opens the robe. And as he does so, we hear that on the news, on the television, the story changes from things, worldly things, army, military things, to conversation about swarms of black locusts. And at the same time that the newscaster is reporting about the locust, the life of the locust, and how they breed and mate and eat within 7 days, through 5 stages of metamorphosis are birthed and destined to consume everything within their path. Ruby is still contorting, and we see bulges and in her neck. The width of her neck is the same exact width as her head. It is disturbing, Ruby says as he brings the knife in. I don't want to die. He says, makes a reference to metamorphosis. Some say that metamorphosis is not death, but it, in fact, life. Takes the knife high above his head. We've panned out. He goes down with the knife and drags it down past her belly button. But still moving. White Ruby is still moving. He hasn't stabbed her unto death. No. He's merely dragged the knife to open her belly, her skin. I don't know. He begins reaching in and pulling out what looks to us like entrails, like her very insides, the innards of White Ruby, slopping them down. It is horrific. We come in on Montrose sitting in that room that he and Yahima were in earlier that day, that morning. And the table and the little chair that Yahima sat at is there, and Montrose is in a chair facing both the doorway and that little table set. He's looking down at bloody fingers, bloody hands, dried all around the cuticles, dark, no longer full of life. And he seems sad and ashamed and guilty, just in demeanor alone. And we see where we hear Leti and Tick come in, and they are talking about a plan for Yahima. They're talking about Leti going to the library and getting some children's books and using those as aids to teach Yahima English so that she may write down what is in Titus's pages, because she cannot speak. We learned in episode 4 that Titus cursed Yahima to be a siren, meaning if she opens her mouth to vocalize, there is a piercing scream that emotes from her belly. And they come into the room, and naturally Leti says, "Where's Yahima?" and looks at Montrose, and she walks on one side of the table. In between the chair and that table, Tick stands just from the in-between place there. Montrose looks up at them, his head does not lift. His head is still down, and he looks up with his eyes as they walk in the room. It is filled with guilt. And fear, right? And he says, "Gone." And Tick instantly, body language, you can see that he knows what his daddy means by gone. He knows, he's aware, And he says, almost instantaneously, as you see his body language begin to tell the story of understanding in what gone means coming out of Montrose's mouth, he says, "And Titus's papers." Montrose doesn't say anything. Tick grabs the table on one end in one hand and the seat of the chair in the other end, and he throws them apart like the Hulk and leaps onto Montrose so fast he knocks him simultaneously out of the chair and onto the floor at the same time, and begins pummeling and beating his daddy in the face with such fervence and just anger Leti has been thrown back hard against the window and the wall. Okay, the whole room is filled with Tick's anger, and he is taking handfuls of it, balling it up in a fist and putting it into Montrose's face. And Leti screams, "Somebody help us. Tick, Tick, you're gonna kill him. You're gonna kill him. Stop him, stop him. Someone help me, stop him." And he is throwing blows like it is coming from heaven. Men run in and they gather him up and try to get him off, and he is tussling and pulling and, "Get the F off of me!" Runs out of the room. Leti runs immediately down to Montrose's side, and Montrose, get some ice. Then we see Tick downstairs in the room where they cast out Epstein. That same room. She's turned into a dark room. And he is pulling the pictures that she's developed. He's looking at them and throwing them and tossing them across the table. And he's looking for something. And she runs down the steps and stands just in the doorway. Then the steps and the doorway meet each other. And she stands at the foot of the steps and simultaneously in the doorway. She speaks calmly. Her energy is not screaming. She says, "What are you looking for?" And he says, the papers. And she says, "What papers?" "Titus's papers." And he runs up to her. And when he does, she is breathing. And we pan down and we see she's holding a bat. She likes Tick. She likes Tick a lot. But up until this point, she has not seen Tick angry. And his anger is a force. When he runs up to her and he says, "Titus's papers, Leti." At the force of how he ran up to her, the wind pushes her hair about, tussles it. Those licks of curls, tussles. He realizes, looking at her face, the bat, the breathing, the hair, the wind, the energy, that he's gone a bit too far. Rushes past her and up the stairs. Our next scene opens with Black Ruby laying on that same round bed with the silken sheets. In walks William, who is naked except for a towel tied around his waist. And he comes in and he begins speaking of butterfly metamorphosis, caterpillars, same cells as humans, he says, a theory which was laughed at until he met Hiram Epstein, a disgraced professor. And Hiram had an understanding of the universe, of certain doorways, magic, if you will. So what William is telling us is that he had these theories, these thoughts, these logical rationales of how one may mimic the behavior of a butterfly in terms of cocooning oneself and being born again as something else. And meeting an individual like Epstein, who is disgraced, and we now know he was the previous owner of Leti's home and was a murderous madman, a mad scientist, if you will. He's into the dark arts, and they've come together in their theories and their application, and there was a potion created. All the while that William is talking, he's walking about the room. He's naked now. He's taken off his towel, and Black Ruby is laying there still, soundly asleep, it seems. And he walks about and gathers his things. He's about to go out, so he's putting together an outfit, if you will. Walks to the closet and pulls out a shirt and puts on a pair of pants, all talking about metamorphosis and Epstein and these types of things. Goes to the mirror and looks at himself and speaks in Latin. There is no translation of what William has said in Latin on the closed caption. We have no idea. And he sits on the edge of the bed and he says, "I know that you're awake, Ruby." This is after the Latin. And she opens her eyes and, sheepishly, and As she wakes up, she says, did I die to become that white woman? Now she's Black Ruby. Beautiful. Naked and beautiful. Okay. And William says no. He says the potion only mimics metamorphosis. It's temporary. It wears off after a time. And she says, magic exists? Yes, indeed. Ruby sits up fully and she says, it scared the skit out of me to wake up white. She says, I was stumbling and crazed and disheveled, screaming. And everyone around me, they weren't scared of me. They were scared for me. It was like you were a human being. And it's like a knock on the door in Ruby's spirit. It seems he understands where she's coming from, what she's saying. He seems as though he can relate. He says, look, I know the transformation was painful. She said, no, it was not like pain. It was like being unmade, undone. He says, it will get easier next time. No, there will not be a next time. And she says, am I free to go? He says, you're free to do whatever you please. And sits a vial of potion down on a little silver tray. And also on that little silver tray is a wad of money clipped. You're free to do whatever you please. And he walks out. Black Ruby gets up, gathers her dress, and looks over at the vial and the money. And our next scene begins with a verbal reading as the soundtrack for the scene of For Colored Girls Who Consider Suicide. And we see a busy crowd on a busy street, and the crowd is white. And at first we can't make out what we're doing here. Everyone is the same, seemingly, but bobbing in as the crowd begins to move away from the main part of the screen, we see a little black hat and some brown chocolate hair and black and white cat-eyed shades, dark black, and the whitest skin you've ever seen. Walking down the street in a black and white dress confidently. It's White Ruby. Oh, Black Ruby. Oh, Black Ruby. It was terrifying. It was like being undone, but obviously it is now like a drug for you. You just want to see one more time. You just want to see one more time what it must be like. Now that I'm fully aware, let me just take it for a small stroll, this white skin. And we see where she goes into an ice cream shop after walking untethered and unbothered and detained along the street. She walks into an ice cream shop front door, walks right up to the counter and asks for a vanilla ice cream cone. Man gladly fixes it, wraps it lovingly, the cone part, and gives it to her, and she's counting out money, and he says, no. All the while the poem is being read aloud as the soundtrack. We're looking at White Ruby, but we hear the voice of a black woman reading this poem that has had impact, that was birthed out of a black woman's belly as the soundtrack. And we see White Ruby on the screen. This soundtrack is Black Ruby's soundtrack. We see White Ruby, but it is Black Ruby's soundtrack. Ruby sitting in a park and just reading a paper, untethered, undisturbed, unbothered. Not a care in the world, not worries. She's not hurrying anywhere. She has no deadlines. And the poem ends. And in this next scene, we see where Tick is nursing those wounds on his knuckles where he's punched the wall and punched his daddy, punched at the world, at his frustration. In walks Leti. She sits a little canister down on the table. And she says, I did take photographs of Titus's papers. I just hadn't had a chance to develop it yet. And as she goes to turn, Tick reaches out and grabs her hand. He says to her, thank you for stopping me. She says, if I wasn't there, would you have killed him? He says, I've imagined it enough times. Mostly when I was younger after he beat me. That violence in him, I never thought it was in me, but I found it during the war. The very thing that you run to sometimes can be the very thing that you're running from. And she says to him, seeing that side of you, it scares me. He says, please don't be scared of me. Oh, the look on Atticus' face. You can see that he is torn. You can see that he is hurt. And you can see his sincerity. He grabs her up and pulls her tight. He's seated and she's standing. And so his head rests on her bosom. And it's this moment. And they begin to kiss. And at that same time, we hear Black Atlas, Return to Love, a guitar ballad, play. And as he sings out soulfully, Leti gets undressed and Tick gets undressed and Tick sits down and Leti takes all of that light latte caramelly skin and she presses it up against Tick's dark, deep chocolate muted skin. And they make sweet love. And it is a beautiful display of black love. It's a beautiful display of blackness, of the hues of blackness, the tones of blackness, the rhythm of blackness. The song playing in the background screams blackness, black love, black intent. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful moment between Tick and Leti. And we can see in this moment, they have, while they've shared this anger, this awareness of anger, we see now they share this moment that's almost like healing, but it's a webbing, it's a tying of the two of them. It's a coming together of things, an awareness of attraction, awareness of love, an awareness of the need one for the other. It's an amazing scene. We cut to Ruby. She's had a marvelous day. She is lounging in a bubble bath and she's singing Devil in the Deep Blue Sea. Looks up and just as she's easing her body down into the warm water, just that much further, she looks over and sees William standing in the doorway. And she comes to herself. She was in a moment of whimsy, of fantasy, of folly. And when she sees him, she sort of snaps to. And he's smiling because he realizes, he knows that she feels it too. The benefit of being able to go through metamorphosis. You like it, huh? That's what he's smiling like. And she says, please cut the bullshit. Stop with the bullshit. She says, I don't think I'm special enough for you to share your conjuring powers with. And he says, why not? She says, there are 1,000 colored girls on the south side. Why share them with me? He says, why not? As he walks over, she sits up in the tub and he gets behind her after rolling those starch white sleeves up and grabs the loofah and reaches it deep down in the water and soaks up the water and drenches it all over her shoulders. It's washing her back and talking to her sweetly. You see, she is enamored by what the potion can do. Oh, yes, of course. And one may argue that Ruby should be running, screaming from the room. She should shun this. It's not something that she is familiar with. Like, and it's coming from a white man. Like, you must be suspect of this whole thing beyond this. Aren't you horrified, Ruby? It's the presentation. Yes, the potion works. Yes, it's fun. Yes, it's indulgent. Yes, it's a fantasy. Yes, of course, it feels forbidden. It feels as though I shouldn't be indulging, but I do. And it's also the presentation. You see, William is kind. William is thoughtful. William is loving. William is tender. William hears her out. William does not seem to be offended by her blackness, offended by her size, offended by her stature in life. He washes her back lovingly. He says to her, the first time I laid eyes on you, as he's washing her back, mind you, he says, the first time I laid eyes on you, I felt magic when there was none. Just me, just you, and the chemistry between us two was magical. Huh? You know, and by the way, I will need a favor when the time comes. She says, a favor? Huh? Same time that she's aware that this is really happening and it is happening for her, she realizes here it comes. The price for all this nice. Says it's for a woman friend that I owe. A friend of mine. Is that a problem? She said it might be, depends on what kind of favor it is. It's small, inconsequential really. Until then, you're free to come and go as you please in whichever form you choose. She steps out of the tub and he greets her with a big warm towel. Gathers it around her. And as he stands there and he talks to her and tells her that she can come and go as she pleases, she's free, whatever form, he dries the suds off of her shoulders, each one. And says, I am curious about something, though, the money that I left for you there. You didn't use it. Why did you leave it? She says, I didn't have to use it. I used the only form of currency I needed, whiteness. Not sure what's more difficult, being colored or being a woman. Most days I'm happy being both, but the world keeps interrupting me. And I am sick of being interrupted. William says, so what's next for Ruby? Uninterrupted. In that moment, we hear Cardi B come over in the soundtrack. It's money. All I need is money. All I need is money, money, money. And then we see a banner out front, a golden archway, and it says Marshall, Fields and Company. And then we see scene after scene of opulence, of displays, store displays, and golden shoes and perfume and silken scarves and all the beautiful, pretty things, pretty things. We come up on an office door and it says Paul Hager, manager. Opens the door and there stands White Ruby in a beautiful red suit. She's got paperwork with her. Now, she's got just what she needs to become that wonderful sales girl that she's always dreamed of becoming. She's got whiteness. He welcomes her in and sits down and he says, well, I just don't know. Your papers are so impressive. He says, I should be afraid for my own job. He says, you've got 6 typing courses here. You've had 5 numbers seminar. He says, maybe I should worry about you taking my job. Your resume speaks for itself, he says. But tell me, who is Hillary Davenport? Hillary Davenport, I say to myself. She lies, she embellishes. This is not conversation she was expecting. I'm sure as a black woman, she was expecting more pointed questions, more accusatory questions, more clarification questions. Have you been caught stealing? Do you have a record? Do you know what customer service is? No, he wants to get to know her. As White Ruby, he wants to get to know her better. She makes up some lie about Maine until she figures out that he's from Maine, small town, and she moves on. She tells him the story about how her mom used to take her and Leti. I mean, my sister and I down to Carson's, and they would walk up and down the aisles and smell and try on, and until her mother felt better. And this moment, she said to herself, this is what I want to do. I want to be one of these ladies that makes everything better, that makes you feel good, that makes you feel special. This is what I would like to do with myself. Oh, he finds it quite fascinating. Quite fascinating. He walks around to where she is sitting and sits on the corner of his own desk, and he says, tell me, how do you feel about colors? Oh, do you mean the colored girl that you all hired? And he says, yes. Well, I mean, we're not that progressive, but how do you feel about it? Well, White Ruby says it's no big deal as long as she's qualified and hardworking. He says, well, a number of employees have quit. And in that moment, White Ruby convulses. Because Black Ruby is about to peek her head out. Ooh, ear cracking. She begins to fiddle for her purse. And she's looking away from him and fiddling down in her bag and rustling through and trying to get her potion out. I don't know. Are you going to take this potion right here, Ruby? What are you going to do? In all of her fumbling around, she knocks the potion out of her handbag and into the chair, the seam of the chair. That same moment, he says, how does assistant manager sound? And she says, oh my gosh, yes, 14 times yes. What an odd statement. 14 times yes. And she stands up and he hugs her. What an odd interview. Hugging? And he says, now let me take you for a tour. And as he hugs her and gathers her up, pulls her tight to him, we see her head poke over his shoulders, and we see Black Ruby inside, pulsating, pushing White Ruby's skin out. Looks like there's angry bears up underneath her skin. But it's Black Ruby. Black Ruby can no longer be contained. White Ruby needs to get that potion. And she wriggles and pops and pulls, and she says, I would absolutely love to do the tour, but first I must use the restroom. And he says, oh, great. And as she scurries towards the door and scurries out, he pulls on his jacket and he looks down in the seat and he says, oh, wait, you left your, picks up the vial and looks at it and says, perfume? And we see White Ruby going down what I would consider the employees' corridor. Ruby goes down the hall and she is pop, kick, crack, thwack. She walks down this hall and she's putting her hand on the wall, steadying herself and dragging blood. And she gets to the elevator and she pushes the buttons and her hip cracks out. Crack! And she pushes it back in. Crack, pop, crack. Oh, convulse. Gets into the elevator, throws her back up against the back of the elevator and slides down. Crack! Neck cracks to the side and head. And as she slides down, we see blood. And last scene is just a millisecond of White Ruby's face melting off to one side. Next scene, we get to see Montrose. He is swollen about the face, the eyes, the forehead, the cheek, the mouth. He's looking at a housing project. Cabrini Green. Walks up to an apartment door and stands there for a moment. Knocks on the door. Ray opens the door and stands back. He's a slender man here in the light. And fair of skin. And he's holding a drink, and he just steps back beyond the door and says, after looking at Montrose's sad display, "Was it the old phase or the ninjas this time?" I said to myself, this time. And Montrose doesn't say a word as Ray steps back into the room. Montrose comes into the room unbuckling his pants, and Ray puts his drink down and unbuckles his pants. I mean, we all know why we're here. We hear Frank Ocean's Bad Religion come over the soundtrack. It's a beautiful song. Ray turns towards the dresser where he's put his drink down, and Montrose has him facing the dresser, and he pulls his pants down. Montrose does, and they drop to the ground, and Ray has pulled his pants down, and he is pushed up now by Montrose against the dresser. Not bent, but just pushed up so to it. We see Montrose drop a wad of saliva in his hand and reaches down and enters Ray from behind. And in this moment, it seems like Leti and Tick for me, because Montrose is dark, heavily melanated, and so is Tick. And Ray is lighter of skin and latte, mulatto-ish. And so is Leti. And here is a moment where two people, melanated people, are comforting one another in the act of sex. Okay? Relieving the pain, the pressure, and receiving something that is soothing, like salve to the wound. We see where Montrose grabs Ray around the back, not around his neck, but around his chest area, and holds him and pulls him close. And we see where Ray takes one of his opposite hand, and he has it intertwined into the knuckles of Montrose's hand. And so you have this dark hand and this lighter hand intertwined. They're holding hands as this act is going on. Bad Religion is playing. And from the lyrics, it seems as though Frank Ocean is talking about his rearing, and it seems like maybe he's talking about his father's religion and this bad religion and this unrequited love, and you get the feeling that this pain that Montrose has showed up at Ray's house with has a lot to do with his own unrequited love, his own bad religion, having been beat by his father and then becoming the abuser of his son. And in this moment, you see him push Ray fully down, completely bent over the dresser now. And he completes, and he climaxes. on every thrust, every push, every pull. And as Ray turns around and faces Montrose, Montrose reaches down and pulls his pants up, and Ray goes to kiss him lovingly as if it's happened before. And Montrose turns his face, and instead he drops down in front of Ray, and Ray begins to scream in pleasure. For me, this is a moment about forbidden. Not just forbidden love, forbidden behaviors, forbidden lifestyle, but being forbidden to be whom you are, being forbidden to love who you choose to love, the way you choose to love them openly. These two gentlemen have a relationship. It has its parameters, obviously. It's 1950s Jim Crow, and they are black men, huh? So yes, it has its parameters. It's a moment. Tick laid with Leti in a connection of pain and frustration and anger. And we see here where Montrose lays with Ray in a moment of brokenness, woundedness, pain, shame, guilt for what he's done to his son, what's been done to him. And Ray, like Leti, is his comforter. It's Ruby's first day at work, and she is dressed beautifully, of course. It's black lacy number, and it's over a white sheath dress, tightly nip, little white hat. And Paul, the manager, walks up to her and kisses her hand. I hope my lips bring you a bit of good luck. And she spins and she looks around at all that she surveys. She's assistant manager over this entire store. And she hears women down below at the perfume counter complaining because they've been waiting a while. And so she goes down the stairs and rounds the bend as the ladies are just walking off. And the black woman that she met as Black Ruby, the one that got the job at Marshall Fields instead of Black Ruby, is walking up, and she's hurried and she's rushed. And White Ruby tells her, how can you do your job in excellence if you are not here to do it? And she says, oh, I am so sorry, Miss Davenport, but I had to wipe the dressing rooms down for this white lady, and I had to restock the shelves for this white lady. Her co-workers. And Hillary says, just breathe. Just breathe. And then in this moment we see where, although it is White Ruby that we see, it's Black Ruby that begins to sort of grill and dismiss and belittle another black woman, this black woman. And she questions her about her education. And the black woman says, oh, I wouldn't call 7th grade much of an education. And she says, oh, you didn't take accounting courses down at the center? And she says, I didn't even know they had those. And she's kind of sizing her up, looking at her up and down. And then she takes a bottle of lotion out of the display samples there on the counter and plops it down towards the young lady and says, your knuckles are ashy. You should use some lotion. And she sachets off and she goes to the back where all of the white girls are trying on clothes and eating snacks and little chocolates and trying on the store's wares, listening to music and singing and dancing, while the black girl works all of their counters and does all of their jobs for them. And she comes into the room as though she's going to lay down the law, but they don't see Black Ruby. They're not intimidated. She's another white woman. Of course, she wants to try on shoes and furs and fine things and strut around and shirk off her responsibilities with us. Why would she do anything different? No one here is working hard. We're white women. They encourage her to put on a pair of cute black stilettos and strut her stuff and walk, and she does, and she does it because she is Black Ruby deep down inside, baby. Those hips, she kicks them and swings them and pops, and she says, oh, you really know how to swing those hips and move those hips. One of the white women says, let me just say what we're all thinking. Address the elephant in the room. Does anyone else think we're going to get more of those here working? And Ruby, she in this moment, as she's still sashaying and shimmying, baby, and just, in her own little world, bopping to the music. And when the woman drops the N-word, Negro, it kind of jolts her out of this haze that she's in, that she's somehow, now that she's gotten this job, superior. You see, because you look white, but we both know, me and you and all of us, and Ruby knows that Ruby is Black. And it's a reminder. Don't get ahead of yourself. You're putting down one of your sisters here, and you're back here in your lackadaisy with the white women. But don't forget, Ruby, you Black too. If it wasn't for the potion, you wouldn't even be here. And the woman mentions something about, you seem so comfortable talking to the Black woman out there. And of course I would. Why wouldn't I be? Because she's a Negro. You think you can talk her into taking us to one of the clubs on the South Side? She was like, why would you want to go to the South Side? This is White Ruby, and she's taking these shoes off. The party is over. Okay. I've been there plenty of times. There's nothing special about it. And she's, you've been to the South Side? Were you afraid? Were you afraid of them? And Ruby is looking at them like they are nuts. They laugh and run off, baby. Now, she does ask them before she gets started dancing if any of them had these experiences with Paul, where he had gotten fresh with them. And they say, oh no, he's a Norman Rockwell painting with a wife and 2 kids. He would never get fresh. But he has been fresh with Ruby. And so we see where Ruby is getting off work, and she's coming out of the employee entrances with all the ladies, and they're coming down the steps, and we look over across the street and we see where William is there with a fine vehicle, and the top is let back, and he's in sort of casual wear, not a suit, just a polo and a nice pair of slim pants and some dark shades and that blonde hair. He looks just perfectly like he came straight from the Hamptons to scoop her up. And the ladies are like, ooh, who is that fine hunker? And Ruby is so proud. She moves back into her cocky phase, the same phase that she was in when she was looking down on that sister earlier at work, and strolls across the street. She says, they say, oh, is he with you? Are you with him? And she says, only when he behaves. She sachets on over and talks to William. He goes to kiss her and she turns her head. I said, oh, Ruby, it didn't take long for you to embody White Ruby. You're wielding her, darling. You're wielding her like a weapon, like a tool. Is this what uninterrupted Ruby looks like? She seems a bit mean. And he tells her, I'm going to need that favor tonight. And she says, what favor? Just don't worry about it. It's a function later on tonight. And when you get there, you'll see Miss Braithwaite. She'll tell you what to do from there. Ruby puts on her red lip and he says, you don't want me to kiss you? As White Ruby. She says, do you want to kiss White Ruby? I says to myself, oh, Ruby, Ruby, Ruby. He says, I have a gift for you in the car. She smiles and cheers up, looks, there's a beautifully wrapped gift on the back seat, and she picks it up and pops the lid off of it, and it is a maid's outfit. She turns and looks at him, and he just smiles. I said, my Ruby, what have you gotten yourself into, darling? We see, well, Ruby is at the dinner party, and it's full of white men, and they're all discussing large business. They're discussing things that have happened in the wake of Hiram's death, and that they've had some defectors. And we see the police chief there, Lancaster, and he's talking about his lodge taking over as the rightful heir of that region. And Ruby is walking around sullenly in this maid outfit and these appetizers on a tray. And Lancaster snaps his fingers and pops his finger over for Ruby to come. And she is standing there like, I wish a mother ducker would. She's got attitude, right? See her go back into the kitchen and throw that tray down. And she's saying, where is this itch? And then we see a knock on the window. It's Christina Braithwaite, and Ruby walks around to the outside where Christina is standing, and she looks at her, and she looks at her with disgust. She looks at her with a bit of jealousy as well. And you were supposed to be here an hour ago. What do you need me to do? Christina says, I need you to put something in the police chief's office. Ruby say, cops? I know you're trying to get me killed. She turns to walk off, and Christina grabs her arm. And she says, do you care for him at all? She's face to face with Ruby. Ruby is mid-turn, and she meets that turn with her face. And do you care for him at all? Ruby relaxes a little bit. I mean, beyond the opportunities he's affording you. It's in this moment Ruby knows that Christina knows what William has done for her. She knows about the potion. She knows about magic. She relaxes a little bit. William is the rightful owner of that seat. The seat to take over the region. And he was shot in the back and pushed in the river and left for dead. And Lancaster thinks he has succeeded. And as long as he thinks he has succeeded, William has an opportunity. And she opens up Black Ruby's hand, and she puts a talisman type object in Ruby's hand. It has a symbol, some drawings and a symbol on it. Ruby, what have you gotten yourself into? What is going on? We cut to Leti. She's developed the film of the pictures of Titus's papers, and she has developed some, and she's hanging the remaining pictures to dry and to come into focus. And Tick is laid across a table of the current pictures that she's developed, and he's asleep. And he's got his spectacles on, so he must have fallen asleep while trying to do a bit of studying. And as he comes to, she says, I thought I should let you sleep. You've been going nonstop. And he tells her what he's working on. He's got all papers all strewn out, and he's trying to sort of decipher the language by using the one tool that he has, the one key that he has, which is the ring that was given to him by Christina before the ceremony in the second episode. Now, prior to this, he was dreaming. Really, it was more of a nightmare for him. And he was once again back at that mansion that he was in episode 2 that crumbled and caught a fire and imploded within itself. And we see Hannah, his great grandmother, running down the hall, and she is once again leading him out, except this time he's in a suit without the jacket, suspenders and pants and tie, belt, shoes, and he's running after her, and she's running just ahead of the flames, and he stops. He wants her to wait, and his feet, the fire starts at his feet, and he catches a flame, and she's standing in the doorway just as she was in episode 2 before she walked off into the mist, standing there pregnant with a book under her arm. Wait. And he begins catching a fire and he screams, and that's when he wakes up. So now he is telling Leti about how he's using this ring because it has his initials in the it's inscribed in the language of Adam. So he knows that they are his initials. So he's starting with this key. Atticus, A. Samson, S. Freeman. He knows each symbol means A. One symbol means A. One symbol means S. And one symbol means F. And from that, he's put together sort of a word key, a letter key that he is going to use to hopefully decipher. And he has all the pictures drawn. And we see a picture with a symbol on it. It's the same symbol that was on the talisman that Christina, one scene earlier, pushed into Ruby's hand. Leti acknowledges the complication of it all. She acknowledges how daunting the task is going to be and how it would have been so much easier if Yahima was there, but she kind of understands why Montrose would let Yahima go, keeping her pent up there for their own use would have made them no better than Titus. Don't you agree, Tick? And Tick was like, yeah. And she turns to go and walk out, and he calls after her, Leti. And she turns in the doorway and he says, I don't think when my pop says he let her go, that's what he meant. And she was like, well, what does he mean? And he looks and she looks. And in this moment, they both understand what let go means. And she has a small panic attack. It's nauseating to her. How could he? And he explains he explains for his father. I think he did it because he thought he was protecting me. Same thing he did when he got rid of the papers. He feels as though he's keeping me from something. He's protecting me from getting hurt from something, from getting hurt from all of this. And she says, no, he's not it's this. It's all of this. It's harming all of us. It's cursing all of us. This isn't right. This is a logical response. Certainly more logical than what Ruby is doing, right? That seems illogical. The logical response is to turn and run from this thing, whatever this thing is. But Tick feels like he can use it. He can use all of this to better himself, to better his people, to better them. And Leti's just not so sure. Tick feels like it can't be inherently evil. It depends on what we do with it. To protect us, to protect ourselves, how can that be bad? Leti walks up to him and she says, look at what your father did to protect you. It's a moment. It is a shocking moment, but also it is a revelatory moment, because not only is he discovering a lot about the language of Adam, but we see in this moment, unlike in episode 4, Tick is trusting Leti. He trusts her with the truth here. He knows it's going to be unsettling for her. He knows that he's revealing something horrific about his father, this terrible, terrible thing that he has done. But he's trusting her with this because he and Leti are in a different place now. They are operating more as a team in this moment. And I'm excited to see where this whole situation with the two of them go. As I said in episode 4, Tick is really our navigator, and Leti is more like our engine. She has enough tenacity to see this thing all the way through to the end if he can just hold her together. Ruby's still at the party. She's headed down to Lancaster's office to put that talisman there somewhere in the office like Christina told her to do. She is so nervous. She's got an empty tray. She's walking with purpose. She's trying to look like she's on her way somewhere so nobody has anything to say to her. She looks like she's looking at some pictures. When she sees some white men coming towards her, she doesn't make eye contact with them. She just looks at the picture and she slides on into Lancaster's office. She goes in there, opens the drawer, and throws that talisman in there. Okay? And she hears something, some muffled sound coming from the closet. She walks over to the closet. She's going to open it. Sounds like there's something trapped in there. Opens the closet up, and there is a dark-haired white man with a scar down the side of his face. Looks like it's been stitched. And blood pouring from his mouth, and he's naked, and he's got his wrists handcuffed to the bar inside the closet, and her knees buckle. She's nauseated. It's disgusting. This blood, this is horrific. At the same time, she hears Lancaster and 2 of his boys come into the office. So she does what any self-respecting scared black person does. She gets into the closet with the man. She is afraid of being killed. She is afraid of being hung or shot or beaten to death. And so she chooses the lesser of the 2 evils, slides him off to the side, and she slides in on the other side and closes that closet door. In Lancaster comes. He is complaining about having to kiss people's behinds just to get a ring. Oh, Tick has a ring, but Lancaster does not. Remember, children, it's all about the bloodline. And Lancaster's going on and on. He takes off the shirt and says he's sweating like a rutting hog and get me a fresh shirt. Oh, we think he's going to the closet, but the shirts are hanging just outside. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Right? Ruby's in the closet with a man who has blood pouring from his mouth, dark black blood. And we hear Lancaster talk about how all this to get a ring, takes off that shirt, throws it to the ground, and from afar, from inside the closet, looking through Ruby's eyes out through the slits, the little slats in the closet, it looks like Lancaster has a tattoo, but he scratches at it like it's hair. All of his body, the chest part of his body, down into the pants, it looks like, the arms from the wrist up, and just around the top of the shoulders and the neck, the part that is hidden from a shirt collar, it looks like a dark tattoo or hair growing. It's odd. Puts on a fresh shirt, and one of the guys there hears all the rustling in the closet. They think it's a gentleman that took money from them. Has he told you the location of where he's hid the money? This is what they say to Lancaster as they laugh slightly. And he says, no, not yet. But like all dead, he'll talk. This man is dead. He seems very alive. He is dead. Ruby covers her mouth to keep from screaming. Ruby, what have you gotten yourself into? Metamorphosis skin peeling, this transformation, magic, a talisman. What is going on? Next, we see Ruby. She's back at work. Somehow she has made it out of the closet. She's walking up on Tamara, the other black worker there at Marshall Fields. And she's chastising her about her displays and how she's not putting them together and how she's got to get on top of her job. And Tamara is telling her that I'm just trying my best. I really, really am doing my best. Your best is not good enough, White Ruby says. If you want to make a mark here, you've got to be twice as good as the white folks. You can't be that envious of white folks either. Trust me, they are seriously effed up. You know, it's a white woman looking over from the side. One of the other workers there, she looking over from her counter. And she says, I mean, seriously effed up. You don't get your ish together, you're going to find yourself in a closet with a man with no tongue. And at that moment, Paul walks up behind and says, oh, is everything okay here? And White Ruby turns and says, oh, no, we're fine. I was just talking with Tamara. She was just telling me how she is going to take us all down to the south side tonight to kick up a leg. And Tamara's like, what's happening here? Still, after everything Ruby has seen up until this point, she still has not turned and ran. She still has not shunned this thing. She is committed to fulfilling her own fantasies. These are her wildest dreams. And this is the price that she's willing to pay to have this, her wildest dream. We go back to Montrose and Ray. This time, though, Ray is getting ready for a performance. He has a bit of makeup on and a stocking on his hair. And it's a lot of his friends are there. Looks like they're getting ready for a type of drag performance. Although some of these individuals may be considered transgender, they look quite feminine, and so does Ray in this moment. He's got on a pink slip, a woman's slip, and stockings, and Montrose is just sitting there. And although he's putting his makeup on, he's also putting a bit of makeup on Montrose's wounds. His wounds have healed just a bit. At this point, he's got one eye that's swollen shut completely, and he's silent. He's just sitting there. He doesn't seem afraid. He doesn't seem out of place. He just sort of seems stuck, like he's numb. There is a little sifter there where he's got a sniffer, with a little bit of alcohol in it. He picks it up and he takes a drink from it. And all the while, Ray is walking around, he and all of his friends, and they are laughing and talking about the show that's coming up. And it is going to be called Locus Migratoria. It's going to be extravaganza, a very elegant affair of singing and artistry. And I notice it as he's talking about the cicada, in this moment. It seems very poetic and very whimsical. It seems like an extravagant tale that he's weaving about the performance that they are about to do. But here again, we hear mention of locusts and migration, right? And they are kidding with Ray about the fact that he's got a man. And have you all kissed on the lips yet? And it's kind of eye-opening, literally, for Montrose as he looks over and he realizes that Ray has been talking about him quite fondly with his friends. Okay, still, he doesn't part his lips. He doesn't say a word. Tamara, as she was forced to do by Ruby, has taken all of the white girls at work and Paul Huger down to a club on the south side. It's jumping, it's popping, it's full of life and energy and music and drinks and laughter and dancing. Beautiful black people everywhere. Quite a few of them are looking at this table full of white women and one white man and a black woman who is Tamara there, and they're side-eyeing it. And then there are some that are dancing with the ladies. And the ladies, of course, are excited to be there. Tamara just looks completely frozen. I mean, she has no choice here. She wants to keep her job. You know, she's got to entertain them in this moment. But at the same time, she can't be too happy to have them there because all of her black counterparts are looking on, you know. And they decide they want to go and dance. And Hillary, White Ruby, is sitting there as well. And she seems a little displaced and disgruntled, like she doesn't want them there either. Like she doesn't want to be down there with them in this moment. And they all get up to go dance, and Paul helps all of the ladies up. And he's going to take Tamara for a dance. And he reaches his hand out for White Ruby to grab his hand and come dance. And she says, "I'll be right behind." Sends him on his way. And then we see her standing in the alleyway. And it looks as if she's just outside of the club in the back behind sort of this gate that's covering the dumpster area. She's just behind this gated area. And she's looking down at her hand as White Hillary in this sort of blue, white, green patterned dress and little hat. And she's looking down at the vial. And she seems almost to finally and at last abhor it, to want to cast it out, to want to do away with it. She's looking at it disgustingly, but at the same time, she's kind of contorting and cracking and popping. Oh, it's time for another dose. She convulses to this place where she closes her hand around the vial and it cracks open, and she's pushed right up to the very, very, very last moment before Black Ruby starts to push her way out of the cocoon that is White Ruby. And as she cracks it open and all of the potion drips out and the glass falls to the ground, she contorts really hard and it spins her around. And she's facing the wall now, and her face is melting. The white cocoon of Ruby, White Ruby, is melting down, and it's unsettling as a visual because it looks like something out of a horror movie. But remember, White Ruby is the cocoon. It is the while metamorphosis means slow change, the cocoon portion of it is that white skin. That metamorphosis, I think, is about the yielding unto the white skin, the yielding unto the cocoon, right? So again, it's just a cocoon. It's not complete transformation. Okay. Black Ruby is coming out, and who knows how many times now Ruby has made the transformation. Okay. And there is this audio. It's visual. The visual is horrific, but the audio, the sounds of the swaths of skin, flesh, blood dripping, peeling. She's reaching down behind her at her haunches, and as she pushes down on her hips and her buttocks, she reaches underneath the white skin, the cocoon, the white cocoon, and sloughs off all of the flesh and the blood and pushes down her legs, and it is just meets at her feet. Her dress has come off and all of this skin is piling around her feet, and we see this beautiful black naked skin of Ruby in all of its width and depth and grand design push through this swaths of skin and cocoon and flesh and blood. And she's now naked and covered in flesh and gook. And she puts her coat on, and she doesn't seem terrified. She doesn't seem afraid. She seems like she's going to leave there with this coat and these bare feet and go where, Ruby? What? Where what's happening? She puts this coat on, and before we can both figure it out, we hear a scuffle. It's Tamara. And through the slits of the fence, she can see the back door of the club that they were at. And Tamara is there, and it is Paul, Mr. Hugo. And Tamara is saying, please, Mr. Hugo, no, please don't. He says, come on, let me just taste it. Let me smell it. I heard y'all smell sweet. I heard y'all taste sweet. And she's saying, please, please, let me go. Come on, let me smell it. She's watching it. Black Ruby is. Naked, covered in cocoon and flesh and skin and muck. She's watching it through the slits. Tamara reaches out and scratches his face. Runs back inside. She's terrified. He reaches up and grabs his lip, and Ruby moves down just a little bit to on the fence and looks through a different slit now. Now she can see him a little bit more clearly, and she sees him reach up to his mouth and gather himself and push his hair back like he ain't did nothing. Oh, this is why you're not coming on to the white girls at work. You consider them dainty and delicate, but a black woman you will assault. This is the look on Ruby's face. The scene ends. Ruby looks mad. She also looks like she's coming to this awareness that while she can look white and play the part of a white woman and wear the cocoon of a white woman, she is indeed black. She is still disgusted as a black woman. She still feels oppressed as a black woman. She realizes this unfairness as a black woman. She realizes this white thing ain't all it's cracked up to be. In this moment, we see where Montrose is in this club. He's still our sullen Montrose with one swollen eye closed and the other eye just swollen. There's a song playing. I don't remember who it is, but the chorus is lonely, 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 lonely world. Lonely, 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 lonely world. There is no conversation. There's this soundtrack, this song, Montrose in this white sheer shirt and this swollen eye and a club full of men dressed as women and some men dressed as men and everyone's comfortable here. It's colorful. Obviously, there's some type of show that went on. Ray has his wig on now and his beautiful gown and his cape, and he's wearing a sash. It looks like he's won some type of award, some type of pageant, or people are congratulating him and hugging him and kissing him, and this song is continuing to play. At first it starts off slow, lonely, 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 lonely world, and Ray is just sort of standing in the midst of it all, still looking confused and just out of place, but not quite out of place, like he was invited and he's not sure what to do. Everyone's singing and dancing and being jovial and congratulating. And Ray spots him from across the room, and he walks up to him and hugs him, and they dance like a couple, like a male female couple. Ray is slightly taller than Montrose is. But Montrose hugs him lovingly, and they sort of sway in a little bit of dance, and then Ray is pulled away, and Montrose is just standing there in the crowd, and other ladies there, men dressed as ladies, walk up to Montrose and kind of, sway and dance with him just a bit each. And then they walk off and take that little bit of party on into the crowd. And Ray is just standing there, and the beat just starts to move fast. It's lonely, 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 lonely world. Lonely, lonely, and it's built up, and something comes over Montrose in this fevered pitch, in this crescendo of music and song. Something happens, something breaks in him, and he starts to smile and bounce to the music and spin slowly, and there's this glittery confetti coming from the ceiling, and at some point he starts to sway and the crowd fills him in, and then it parts and we see that Montrose is in this sort of freedom sway, and the crowd of individuals come and grab his feet and his shoulders, and his arms are outstretched like he's the Christ on the cross, but they are holding him up and lifting him up above the crowd, and he seems like he feels more free now and more joyful than he has ever felt in his entire life. They spin him just a bit as he looks at the ceiling and then puts him down. And then he is once again kind of standing there caught between a dance, a sway, a swirl, an encircling of a bit of joy, a bit of pain, a bit of remorse. And I wonder to myself, did this moment just happen in Montrose's mind, in his drunken spirit? Did this really happen? And the look on Montrose's face says the same to me. It says, is this a dream? This place of freedom, this place of untethered, unchained happiness, this place where I can be me and love who I love and be happy. Is this real? Is this live? Is this true? And he's caught up in just the perfume of all of it, of everything. And he sees Ray across the room, and he walks across that room and puts his hand on Ray's face and the other hand on the other side. And he pulls Ray's face down to his, and he kisses him deeply and passionately. Wow. Montrose is different now. Montrose is different now. Ruby's back at Williams, and she's sitting on little love seat, a little chase lounge there, and she is still covered in flesh and gook, naked, wrapped in some blankets, shoulders out. Looked like she was half asleep when Christine walked in from the basement. Christine sits up and she says, "You're not William." Why would Ruby be sitting there naked in that gook? Why hasn't she cleaned herself up and gotten herself up? She seems also stuck. A bit like Montrose was in the middle of that party, unsure what to do next, what to do now. "You're not William." And Christine says, She says, "That's the only door that locks in this house. What's in the basement?" This is Ruby. Christine doesn't answer. She walks over and sits next to Ruby, naked, wrapped in a blanket, covered in gook, and says, "How was the world to you, Ruby?" Uninterrupted. And Ruby says, "He told you about that?" Christine says, "I was like you once, disillusioned and pissed." Ruby says, "Shut the F up. Only thing white women know about disillusion is the disillusion in yourself. For 1 minute, pretend as though you understand where I'm coming from. This is Ruby's energy. Okay? How dare Christine compare her pain and her confusion and her disillusion to her own. Christine reaches down on the table and picks up one of the vials and says, "He gave you this so that you can live uninterrupted so that you can be whoever the F you wanted to be. Picks the vial up and holds it up to the light and says, "Who are you really, Ruby?" Uninterrupted. In that moment, we see White Ruby is back and she is at work, knocking on Paul Huger's door. He opens the door and she comes in and she tells him, he stands up. Now he's watching television, just chilling, just relaxing, no real work going on here. And she walks in and she says, he says, "How can I help you, Mrs. Davenport?" And she says, "I want to give my notice." And he says, "What? If this is about money, she says, "No, I think this is best." But she says, shh. It's not about money. This is about you. I'm resigning so that I can F your brains out. And he's like, oh, this is something he's always wanted. She undoes his tie. First, she tilts his head back and licks from his Adam's apple up to his chin. I said, "Oh, Ruby." She licks up from his Adam's apple to his chin, undoes that tie and slides it out from the shirt. And his hands, he goes to grab because he finna get all into this. She snaps those arms down to his side and brings those hands in front, takes that tie and she ties those hands tight. And he's like, oh, Mrs. Davenport, shh, you just love to be in control, don't you, Mr. Manager? Huh? She scoots back and sits down on the chair in front of him. He's standing there. Now she's already kneeled down and undid his pants and pulled them down, and he's just standing there with his hands tied and his pants down, and he's breathing all heavy. She's taking charge and he is about to do something freaky. Oh, he is excited. He is turned on, looking like a Poindexter, but baby, that freak in his eyes. And she sits down and pulls her panties off, some bright red panties, baby. Pulls them off and walks up to him. And he says, "Oh, Mrs. Davenport, your eyes." And it's in this moment we see that it's not blue-eyed White Ruby, but we see a little brown-eyed Black Ruby poking through. She takes those panties and shoves them in his mouth, baby. And then we start to hear Cardi B's Bodak Yellow start to play. It's bloody shoe. This is red bottle. This is bloody shoe. And then if you wanted to. It's playing in the background. She pushes him down on the ground and he is struggling at this point, but nobody can really hear him scream because he's got these red panties in his mouth and he is on his belly with his arms in front of him tied and his pants are down and she's got his naked rear end out, baby. And as she takes that belt that she's took from around his pants and got it around his neck, and she is leading him on like a little piggy, like a little piggy, and she's got him all hog tied down there on the ground. We see where the skin, baby, on her face begins to peel. In this moment, she takes her shoes off and we hear Cardi B, "This is expensive, this is red bar, this is bloody shoes, She takes her heels off and takes her shoes off, and that pointed heel stiletto that she is wearing, she takes it and she jams it up his rectum, and she grinds it and she pushes it and she digs it, and he is screaming bloody murder. But she got the back of that doggone that belt that she got tied around his neck, and she is holding it like she is riding him into the sunset, but she is really grinding that stiletto deep down into the flesh of his rectum, baby. All the while, that white cocoon skin flesh of White Ruby is peeling out now in huge chunks, and we can hear it hitting the ground And Cardi B is playing and he is screaming and the flesh is hitting the ground. And she flips him over and takes that heel and digs it down into his chest and leans over on that knee as that last little bit of white flesh falls from her beautiful black face. And that full melanated skin has popped all out and up in through. And she leans over. And she tells him, I wanted you to see that a ninja BF'd you. Now, when he was sexually harassing Tamara outside of that club, and she smacked his face and ran back inside, that's what he called her, a ninja B. And in this moment, the uninterrupted Ruby in her full power, Black Ruby, she F's him. And she wants him to know that a ninja bee did it. Okay? And then she steps over him. He is screaming bloody murder. What the heck is going on? Not only has he been sodomized with a 4-inch heel, baby, but he has seen the flesh of what he thought was a white woman peel off. And underneath is a black woman. A big black woman. She sachets on off, puts a coat on and sachets on off. Who he gonna tell? Huh? How he gonna explain this? Huh? How he gonna explain his butthole being torn asunder? Okay? It's brutal. It's brutal. It's horrific. It says a lot. It says a lot about Ruby. Huh? That these are the things that your mind have come up with. I dare say I've thought of worse things. I mean, what does one think of when one thinks of revenge? Something that they can definitely get away with. It's human nature. It's human nature, especially from those who have been oppressed. Oh, yes, we like to give scriptures and forgiveness and turn the other cheek. And, oh, as long as we all know the truth and all of that. But in this moment, in her full power, she takes a moment to exact some revenge. Not just for Tamara, but for Black women, period, everywhere that have been violated, that have been harassed, that have been raped and left with no justice behind it. Yes. It does say a lot about Ruby. This moment of revenge, it is also an empowering moment for Ruby. She wanted to, as a Black woman, take her power back. As a Black woman, exact this revenge. That was important to her. Something tells me going forward that Ruby will use the cocoon of white Ruby as a vehicle instead of as a costume. We see Leti in the bathtub gathering herself after the news of Yahima, and in comes Tick and he sits down in a chair in front of the tub just to check on her. Are you okay? She says, I've been trying to say a prayer for Yahima, but my mama's faith was real. Mine is just, I don't know. She drug us to church every Sunday, and more than knowing the religion, I feel as though I've just been playing a part. She talks about how she thought she had something special with Tick, but then he was going to go back to Florida and leave her there. And Tick says there was a woman over in Korea, and name was Gia. And, Leti's a little unsettled by this. I mean, Tick was her first, but obviously she's not Tick's first. And you can see it sort of in her energy kind of shifts a little bit. He still continues to say that he's not sure what he had with Gia was love or not. He's just not sure, because his mama and daddy was married. Their love was enduring, but it was unknowable. He's not really sure what love is, that this connection, this specialness, this. And Leti says her mother fell in love every 2 seconds, and Ruby just like her, but she never wanted to be with a man and just to be with him. She wanted it to mean something. And it is a moment. It's a moment because here is this revelation that although there are some things in this episode that seem horrific and graphic, there is also the individuals that look regular, that look normal, that look everyday, but that too is a cocoon of sorts. It's not as bloody. It's not as graphic. It's not the sloughing off of large swatches of skin and flesh. It's not that graphic, but it's still equally as painful. It's still equally as confusing. It's still equally as constraining. We see it with Montrose as well. He is in his own type of cocoon, but instead of it being this blossoming, this feeling of blossoming, which he has just now attained, all this while, mind you, Montrose and Ray are older men. Okay. All this while, Montrose's cocoon has been more like a prison. He's only just now feeling as though it is this blossoming in this small little happy moment. And Leti likewise talks about how she played a part. She was in this type of way as it pertains to her religion, as it pertains to how she thought of the world, how she saw the world, how she saw love, her place in love. Tick talks about his own type of cocoon, going off into war to avoid the pain of his father and everything that was going on here stateside. He went off to war and found even more pain and a little bit of something that could have been perceived as love, but he's not sure about that place that he has insulated himself into, or the changes that those cocoons, each one of them, has wrought in their lives. We see where Ruby is sitting in the parlor once again at William's house when he comes in, and she stands up and she wants to know what's in the basement. She's got clothes on this time and she's not covered in gook. She's our beautiful, voluptuous Ruby that we know and love in a wonderful floral dress, and she approaches him as if this is her house and this is her husband and she has the right to question him. You and your lady friend come and go in and out of that basement all times of the night, and I want to know what's in there and I want to know what's down there. And William was like, oh, you scared me. And as he walks past her, taking his towel on his way to the basement, he falls to his knees. William! And he takes the shirt off and she sees his bare back, and she sees something writhing underneath the skin of his bare back, the whiteness of his skin. It looks like something's in there moving and stretching almost to get out. And Ruby seems shocked. She seems taken aback. She seems aghast. Although it looks like what is happening to William is what happens to her. But looking at it on William, it doesn't look the same. And she's saying, oh my gosh, what's happening? What is going on? Do you not recognize metamorphosis? Do you not recognize the shedding of one's cocoon? But who is it? William pushes out his arm and the skin splatters from around it, and another arm comes out covered in blood, and he stretches his neck long, and all of that William skin sloughs off of him. That William cocoon sloughs off, and out of William's head pops another head covered in blood and stretches, and then stands up and whacks the rest of that skin cocoon William flesh off. It's Christina. And Ruby stands there behind Christina and says, you've been William this whole effing time? And it cuts back to Tick. Tick is once again poring over the papers, poring over the letter key that he has made there. And he is looking over and he writes a couple of letters and he begins to shiver and shake and runs over to the phone and after he grabs the paper up, he runs over to the phone and he dials, and the operator, get me 555-222-1345. And the phone rings. And the line picks up and he says, how did you know? And the voice says, do you believe me now? How did you know? Tick is crying. I told you. You should have never left. Hangs up. That's the episode. Cinnamon. Where you gonna run to? Cinnamon. That's the episode, you guys. It was so good. By now you've seen the episode. By now you have discussed the episode. I hope that my retelling of episode 5, Lovecraft Country season 1, Strange Case, helps you to see it in a different light. Helps you to see it from a cocoon perspective. Helps you to see how this sudden awareness of who one really is, as opposed to who one wants to become, very different things. And they all wear a different cocoon, a different costume of sorts. And we see it in our straight characters. We see it in our gay characters. We see it in our female characters. We see it in our obese characters, our skinny characters, our characters that are females, our characters that are males, our characters that are white, our characters that are black, our characters that are in a position of power, our characters who are seeking positions of power. Oh, there's layers to this thing, to this cocoon thing, to this mask thing, to this costume thing. What the outside says is a completely different language from what the inner man says and or is doing. You guys tell me what you think. What are some of the awarenesses that you noticed here in this episode? What are your feelings about this episode? Are you stuck in this place of horror at the blood and the gore and the skin and the flesh of it all? Are you able to just see now that you've heard my review? Are you able to peek just a little bit behind the smoke and really look at the fire of a thing? I'd love to hear what you think. Put it down below. And until next time, honeybees, mwah, 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 I'll holla.